On Sunday nights, Mark usually sat at the kitchen table a little longer than he needed to. His daughter was asleep, the house was quiet, the TV was off. He'd scroll through his phone for a while, check a few things, and then eventually go to bed, telling himself he'd deal with the week when it came. Money was always somewhere in the background of those nights. It wasn't a sense of panic, more like a low-grade awareness. Mark was 38. He worked full-time, paid his bills. He wasn't reckless with his money, and he wasn't clueless either. He knew roughly what he made and roughly what he spent, but that word, roughly, had carried him for years. Every month followed the same pattern. Paychecks came in, bills went out. Whatever was left was for food, gas, and everything else. If something unexpected happened, he'd adjust. If things felt tight, he got more careful. That was budgeting as far as he was concerned. The problem was it never felt predictable. Some months felt fine, others felt tight for no obvious reason. Nothing dramatic would happen, but halfway through the month, he'd already be checking his bank account more than he wanted. That feeling of running out of runway before the month was over was becoming a constant quiet hum of stress. One Sunday night, instead of just scrolling, Mark opened his banking app and just looked. He wasn't there to move money or pay anything. He just wanted to see. He tried to replay the month in his head: rent, utilities, groceries, gas, a couple of random charges he barely even remembered agreeing to. It all just blurred together. And then he realized something deeply uncomfortable. He had never actually looked at his money as a full month. He only ever saw moments, transactions, reactions, but he never ever saw the whole picture. So Mark grabbed a notebook from a drawer. Nothing fancy, just a blank page and a pen. At the top of the page, he wrote the name of the upcoming month. Under that, he wrote down his income. He listed his paydays, the dates, and the exact amounts he knew were coming in. He didn't include potential overtime or anything that wasn't a guarantee. Seeing it written down like that felt different. The number wasn't any smaller, but it was clearer, it was solid and real. Next, he wrote down his bills. Rent first, then utilities, phone, internet, insurance, subscriptions, and the minimum payment on his credit card. He added the due dates next to each one. Halfway through the list, Mark paused. Nothing on the page surprised him. He knew all these bills existed. What surprised him was how organized it all suddenly looked. The money wasn't just disappearing into a void. It was scheduled. It had a job to do. Below the bills, he wrote down the things he usually handled just on instinct: groceries, gas, school expenses for his daughter, clothes, medical copays, the random stuff that always seemed to show up whether he planned for it or not. He didn't overthink the numbers. He just estimated honestly based on what he could remember. When he added everything up, there wasn't much left. Now, normally, that realization would have bothered him. It would have triggered that familiar sense of anxiety. But this time, it was different. This time, it explained everything. This was why the middle of every month felt so heavy. This was why he was always bracing for impact. The numbers on the page didn't create the problem. They just revealed it. So he turned the page. On the next one, he wrote the same month again and divided it into 4 simple sections: week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. He took the money that was left over after bills and assigned it across those weeks. Week 1 got a little more because groceries always hit early in the month. Week 3 was tight. He looked back and realized it always was. So he planned for it to be tight. And week 4 got a small buffer because something always seemed to happen right at the end of the month. This wasn't about cutting his spending. It wasn't about deprivation. It was about pacing. It was about giving his money a roadmap for the month ahead. The next Friday, payday came. Normally, Mark would just relax for a few days, assuming the rest of the month would somehow work itself out. This time, he sat down at the table with his notebook. He paid the bills that were due soon and left the rest of the money untouched. He moved his grocery money for the week into a separate checking account he'd barely used before. He didn't set up any fancy automation. He just manually separated his money by its purpose. That weekend, his daughter asked if they could go grab breakfast. In the past, he would have hesitated, doing quick, stressful math in his head. This time, he just checked the notebook. Week 1 had room. Yeah, he said, let's go. Midweek, the electric bill hit, and it was higher than last month. Normally, that would have put him on edge for the rest of the week. This time, he just crossed it off the list on his page. The balance in his account dropped, but the plan stayed intact. That feeling was completely new. At the end of the month, Mark sat down again with his notebook, not to judge himself, but just to review. He saw that food had cost a little more than he thought. Gas had cost less. One random expense did show up, but the buffer he'd set aside for week 4 covered it. So he adjusted the numbers for the next month. He didn't start over from scratch. He just built forward, learning from the month before. After a few months of this, something really started to change. He stopped checking his bank account constantly. He stopped doing that frantic math in his head while standing in the grocery store aisle. When a question came up, like going out with friends or buying something for the house, he already knew the answer. Yes, that fits, or no, not this week. And for the first time, there was no guilt or anxiety attached to either answer. It was just a fact. A few months later, his car needed some work. In the past, that would have immediately turned into credit card debt and a wave of stress that bled into every other part of his life. This time, it was still annoying. Nobody likes a surprise car repair bill, but the stress was contained. He knew exactly how to handle it. He adjusted the next month's plan, moved some things around, and moved on. Mark didn't earn more money. Life didn't suddenly get easier or less expensive. What changed was clarity. That simple notebook didn't control his money. It just showed him where it was going before it left. And that was the entire difference. The constant, loud noise of money anxiety in his head started to quiet down. And for the first time in a very long time, Mark felt like he was actually running his month instead of just reacting to it. If Mark's story feels familiar, maybe it's time to grab your own notebook. You don't need a fancy app or complicated software. You just need a pen, a piece of paper, and the willingness to just look. Thank you for watching. If this helped, consider subscribing for more stories and tips on taking control of your financial life.